We have a variety of people in this auditorium today. I have students from some of the science classes here earning extra credit. I have New York State certified nursery and landscape professionals earning some professional credits that they have to get to keep up their licensure. I have teachers earning credits. I have people from the general public. I have professors. So it's a really broad audience with a, pardon? Oh. Yeah, master gardeners. Yep, we've got master gardeners too. So there's a broad range of people with backgrounds in gardening. Some garden a lot, some don't garden at all. Some are just here for the extra credit. I know, it's okay. You'll survive, I promise. Now, so as I'm going through the talk, I'm going to talk about the basic stuff and some of the more intricate things. And a lot of this is very science-based. So I have to be able to address the entire range of interest levels and backgrounds today. Our talk today is going to focus on the importance of scientific and information literacy to help you determine the best sustainable practices for your landscape. You have to decide what is right for you, what's right for your yard, your family, your environment. I am going to provide you with what science says, but I'm not going to tell you stop doing what you're doing. Because if it works for you, okay. But if I can tell you how to save money, save time, and maybe, save your back, because come on, let's face it, some of the work we do as horticulturalists or as gardeners is a little tough. Maybe we can save ourselves some of that agony. And I'm focusing on a lot of the things that float around the internet. With the advent of social media, so many people are getting their information from Facebook, Pinterest. We see it. And if there's a pretty picture with some words on it, we believe it's true. Well, there is so much misinformation out there. I'm going to try to clear up some of that bad information out there, some of that fake news, and help you make some good choices. So this is one of my favorite quotes that I tell my students all the time. Every day we make important decisions that impact our lives today and well into the future. It's going to impact a lot of our gardening choices and how those gardening choices impact the environment, not just our little yard, but how what we do in our landscape can affect the environment overall. What to plant, where to plant it, what cultural practices to use. It's very important. So we're going to talk about science and information literacy. We're going to look at some really good resources for gardening. We're going to look at some problematic resources to avoid, because there are a lot of them out there. And we're going to spend some time debunking common garden myths that go around social media like wildfire. Because let's face it, don't believe everything you read on the internet just because there's a picture with a quote next to it. Social media spreads lies like wildfire. We need to make sure we are not just consuming information and accepting it as gospel truth. So today, we're going to learn how to save time, money, and energy, be smart consumers, simplify our lives, and live more sustainably. Because sometimes the best option is easier and better for the environment. We're going to learn how to analyze information to make sure it's valid, pull information together from various sources, apply that information in the appropriate context, and determine the best course of action. And just because you read it on the internet doesn't mean it's true. Even if it's in a book, it may not be true. Science may have disproved it. Science may have evolved. Lots of things that are in books are outdated. Many things that you find on the internet might be appropriate for a given purpose. Maybe it's for agriculture, but not home landscape use. Maybe it's for a given region of the country, but not Western New York. So we have to be very careful with that information that we find. This is the definition of scientific literacy. The knowledge and understanding of scientific concepts and processes required for personal decision making and how that affects our participation in civic, cultural affairs, and economic productivity. We want to be scientifically literate. The digital age provides us with so much information, seemingly unlimited. We have to be able to sort through that information and evaluate the credibility of those sources. Once we find that information, evaluate its credibility, we then need to communicate it to others. We don't just want to click share on Facebook if we haven't figured out if that information is correct or not. We want to avoid spreading false information, inaccurate information. So how do we do that? Well, remember when you were younger, back in like grade school, and you learned about the scientific method? Observation, question, research, hypothesize, experiment, drawing conclusions. Look for the science. Find the scientific method in the information you're looking for and apply that to see if it works. Look for independently funded, controlled experiments. Find things that are reported in peer-reviewed journals, not just the journals that will accept any type of research when you pay a fee. Why is it important? Well, this is information from a 2015 Harris poll that was sponsored by the National Association of Landscape Contractors. Look at how important yards are to Americans. 83% of Americans say their yards are important. It's important to have a yard. If they had a landscaper, it would allow them to have a nicer yard. Okay? And it affects their home values. Even millennials believe so. 74% of millennials believe that it's important to spend time in their yards and have a yard. So if we can look at the impact of our practices every day, we can make sure that we're living sustainably. John Miller, a University of Michigan professor, did some research and found that 70% of Americans cannot understand the science section of the New York Times. That's pretty sad. In fact, 49% of the people he surveyed found that they believe tomatoes don't have genes, but genetically modified tomatoes do. There are no genetically modified tomatoes currently on the market today. You cannot walk into Wegmans and buy genetically modified tomatoes. Okay? Flavor Saver died out years ago. That failed. That was a marketing plan that just went away. As we live our lives in a more sustainable manner, we want to make sure that the choices we make for our gardens are healthy and functional. We need to solve problems in the landscape. But we also want to make sure that those choices are not going to have long-lasting consequences. So if we're picking pesticides, or if we're tilling the garden, we're bringing in soil, we're applying fertilizers, we want to make sure whatever we do doesn't harm the landscape over time. We also need to conserve natural resources. We live right next to the Great Lakes. Anything we do in our yards has the potential to run off into the storm sewers and into the Great Lakes. We need to reduce waste. Look at what's happening in our oceans, all the plastics. So we need to figure out how to not have as much plastic. All of these plants that you guys get to take home, what are they sitting in? Plastic pots. In our industry, plastic pots are a big problem. All these plastic flats and plastic pots are causing a disposal issue. What do we do with them? So we're going to make some better choices to make sure that our future isn't messed up. And a lot of the choices we can make today can rectify some of the choices that were made in the past when we didn't have enough information to make better choices. Now that being said, all that sciencey literacy stuff, that's done. With all that being said, it will sound like I'm up here on a soapbox preaching to you. It's going to get a little snarky. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. I am not discounting anecdotal evidence. If your grandma has done something for decades and it works for her, and you do it too, go ahead and do it. Because I will tell you, my grandma Rita grew stuff in her backyard in Arizona that you should not be able to grow in Arizona. So grandmas know best. Okay? Science has not fully evaluated every topic yet. There's no way. So you might try to do some research and find that no one's investigated it yet. So you can do your own research in your backyard. There's nothing that says you can't do research in your own backyard to find out what works or what doesn't work for you. Science may have disproven something. Science may not have come up with the conclusion either way, or science may have supported a practice. And we'll talk about some of those things. Things that I learned when I was in college have been revised. Things like painting wounds when you prune a tree. We don't do that anymore. Planting practices have been revised. The way we backfill soil has been revised. So science constantly revises previous knowledge. If I talk about a specific practice, I'm not going to make any claim for or against a brand of product, a type of product. I don't sell stuff anymore. It's not my job. Okay? And if you do use something in your landscape, make sure you read and follow all the label and safety guidelines for that product. Never use anything against label guidelines. I know all sorts of backdoor ways to use stuff off label. Am I going to tell you any of those today? Nope. Not at all. So what's the most dangerous phrase in the English language? Well, we've always done it this way. This quote was attributed to a woman named Grace Hopper. She was an American computer scientist and a Navy Rear Admiral. Pretty cool, right? I love that quote. We've always done it this way. So we're going to make sure that even if we've always done it that way, if we're going to continue to do it that way, there's a reason why. When we look for those credible sources, figure out the legitimacy of the source. What's the original source? Is it someone who's just quoting someone else? Backtrack. Okay? Find out who said it first. Like, I had to go back and find out who made that quote. This one is tough. Don't just find answers that support what you already believe. That's hard. And as a professor, I have to teach my students the pros and cons, both sides of an issue, for and against, a lot of topics. And so I have to do this all the time. I teach horticulture. There are things like Monsanto's the devil, Roundup causes cancer, GMO foods will kill you. All these things that I have to present science for and against. So we have to make sure we are looking for the information on both sides of an issue. And just because you have those pretty pictures, it doesn't mean it's true. Just because all your friends on social media shared it, doesn't mean it's true. And here's the one that gets everybody. Some falsehoods are rooted in a bit of truth. People like the food babe, David Wolf, will take a tiny bit of truth and twist the information, twist the research to their own ends. So sometimes you need to look for multiple sources and make your own decisions. Okay? Take everything with a grain of salt. Be a skeptic. So what are some non-credible sources? Well, Facebook memes. People making a profit off of what they're recommending. There's a really big company in town who's a big supporter of my program that sells a particular fertilizer, and they claim it has a ton of research. But when I've asked to see the research, oh, yeah, we'll get it to you. Okay, but I can't educate anybody about this product because you won't give me the research. And it's not really the local company, it's the vendor who won't give them the research. Make sure you're not getting information from people pushing an agenda. Don't go to clickbait or content generator websites. And make sure you're not just getting information that doesn't fit Western New York. We are unique. Our climate is unique, right next to the Great Lakes. Yes, we're cold, but we're also insulated by the Great Lakes. Think about the historical aspects of how the United States was populated, how the pioneers moved west. This is where all of the fruit tree nurseries were. The pioneers would take the trees from here and carry them west. This is where it all began. Rochester, Western New York, Mount Hope Nursery, it was all here. Then right along Ohio, along the lake, very fertile ground, good growing weather, a lot of history here. So you need information that is geared towards Western New York. Not information from Washington State, not information from California, information from here. Always apply the CRAP test. Now I know that's a bad word, I know, I'm sorry. This is a test that was put together by the librarians, University of California at Chico. Now my mom's a librarian, so I've grown up with this, right? Is the information current, relevant? Who's the authority putting it out? Is it accurate? And what purpose was it done for? So apply the CRAP test and see if it stinks or not. I have compiled some sources for you. Now they're all at a website on Google. I keep adding to it every time I find it. So you can go to this website, and I just add to it as I find them. It's always there. It lists Facebook pages, Facebook groups, websites, industry resources. It's all organized by topic. And while I can't control what those organizations put on their pages, it at least has mostly reliable, good information. You can go to your cooperative extension agents for information. We have some very good extension agents locally. You can go to your master gardeners. You can go to your New York State certified nursery and landscape professionals who are employed by your local independently owned garden centers and landscape companies, greenhouses and landscape companies. Now, I will put a big asterisk on this. If you go and you search the internet and you look up extension bulletins and you talk to master gardeners and you talk to SNLPs, you still may get some bad advice. Just because they've picked up on some bad habits too. It's just out there, it spreads. So still double check things. I was just on the internet the other day and I pulled up an extension bulletin and it was promoting compost tea. And I thought, why in the world is the extension bulletin promoting compost tea? Well, it was an older bulletin and it was not a peer-reviewed bulletin, it was just one put out, I can't remember who wrote it. So watch, just double check. You can still get bad info from the so-called experts. So you need to be your own expert and double check everything. This is that web page. You can always go find some good resources on. So let's start busting the myths. Any questions so far? All right, now if I get a little snarky, throw something at me. I have a tendency to go off the rails a little bit. Who rolls their lawn? Don't raise your hand. This is not the talk where you want to raise your hand. Okay? Lots of people get lumps and bumps in their lawn, and I admit it's uncomfortable when you're walking across a lawn and it's kind of lumpy and bumpy. And if you're trying to jog across the lawn after a kid or a dog, you have a tendency maybe to turn your ankle. So you want it smoother. So you think, oh, I'm going to hire a guy to come and roll my lawn. Or maybe you've got one that you tow behind your little John Deere tractor. Stop. Okay? Lawn rolling causes soil compaction. Do you know what's beneath our feet? Do you know there's an entire world down there? Soil is not just dirt. Yes, you've got the sand, silt, and clay, but you've got these air spaces, these pores, that, yes, are filled with soil, solution, water, and nutrients, but you need the air. There are macro and micro flora and fauna down there that need the air. And if you drag that heavy roller across the ground, you are squishing out all those air spaces, and you're destroying the roots' ability to respire. You're hurting your plants. You're hurting all the organisms that live down there. And you're actually going to have more lumps and bumps next year. So then you're going to have to call the guy back and have him roll again. And that costs money. Or if you do it yourself, it costs time. Your turf isn't going to grow as well because the turf roots are going to be struggling. And you know what? When you have struggling turf, you get weeds. Because weeds don't care. Weeds can grow in concrete. They'll pop up anywhere. So you're going to have more problems. You'll have drainage issues because the water can't infiltrate in and percolate through. So what do? You hate those lumps and bumps. I agree. Don't roll, aerate. Get a core aerator and dethatcher. Do this every fall for the first few years, and then you won't have to do it as often. But this is going to reduce compaction by pulling out these little plugs of soil, and it drops them right back down so you don't lose anything. It's going to aerate and improve the ability for your turf roots to respire. It's going to provide more oxygen down deep for all those organisms. The turf is going to grow better. Better growing turf, fewer weeds. Okay. If you have lumps and bumps, start top dressing with compost. Get some bags of compost, spread it down, rake it out. And if you have big, deeper depressions, slice up the turf, lift it up, put some topsoil down, maybe some compost, and lay the turf back. Okay. If you need to, you can reseed. Lime applications. You know when you drive down the road and you see the signs on the corners? Lime applications, lawn rolling. I don't want to offend anybody. If you're a Joe Blow with a pickup truck and a lawnmower, I'm sorry. You don't need to lime your lawn unless you've done a soil test. Okay? So many random lawn companies out there lime lawns every year. It's not necessary. People think, oh, we have to lime the lawn. It's going to make my turf grow better. It's going to increase my soil pH. Well, unless you've tested your grass and your soil, to know what the pH is, you don't know that you need to do anything to your pH. And most soils in western New York have the appropriate pH to grow turf. So why put it down? You're applying a chemical, calcium carbonate or magnesium carbonate, to the soil, and it's not needed. Where's it going to wind up? Yeah. So you spent money, you spent time and effort, and now you just put it into the Great Lakes. That's not good. But this pH thing, some of you may not have any experience with pH. So what is it? Well, pH is a scale that goes from 0 to 14, and it's a measure of the hydrogen ion concentration in the soil solution. It's the acidity or alkalinity of the solution. So things like acids, the Diet Coke that I'm addicted to, okay, they're on that lower end of the scale. Things like bleach, lyes, they're up on that upper end of the scale. They're more alkaline. But turf likes it in between that 6 and 7, that more neutral range. pH affects the availability of nutrients to plants. So you don't want to be messing with your pH unless you have to. Because you can tie up nutrients and then your plants might have a nutrient deficiency. Okay, it's that time of year. Did you put your step 1 on? Yeah, don't raise your hand either. There's always that big push to put your crabgrass preventer on along with your spring fertilizer, right? You go to Home Depot, there's pallets of this stuff. Unfortunately, it's not the best option. Yes, it's time to put down crabgrass preventer if you have a crabgrass problem. If crabgrass bothers you, it doesn't really bother me. But I'm one of those people that I don't need that lush, perfect Kentucky bluegrass lawn. Now, you might be. I don't care. I can handle a few weeds because I just don't want to put down chemicals on my lawn. By putting down fertilizer this time of year, you're going to have nutrient runoff. Your turf can't take up that nutrition yet. So even though you're paying for it and you're putting it down, your turf isn't getting any benefit from it. So don't do it. If you do have a crabgrass problem and it bothers you, it's an annual weed, put a straight crabgrass control product down when the forsythia bloom. That's usually the timing that tells you the weather's appropriate. And then if you want to fertilize your lawn, the very earliest anyone recommends putting lawn fertilizer down is late May or early June. And that's only if you're a high maintenance lawn person. Some people are high maintenance lawn persons because they like that beautiful lush green lawn. My dad's kind of like that. He likes the perfect green lawn. And he lives in Arizona. So he has to water. Okay? They have sprinklers. But I'm not. If you are a lower maintenance person, I work too much. I have small kids. I don't have time to be out there fussing with my lawn. So the most important time, if you only have time to do this once a year, fertilize in the fall. If you look at the recommendations, see that, I know it's kind of small, that very bottom row, that's where you don't water your lawn. When you mow, the clippings are just dropped back down on the ground, which is the most sustainable thing to do, because don't bag your clippings. That's great fertilizer. That's great organic matter. Let it drop back down on the ground. One annual application of fertilizer in September. That works for me. I can handle that. I can kick my husband out there and say, go do it in September. Now we get into the things that float around Facebook a lot. Coffee grounds. We love our coffee. Okay, this is Tim Hortons country. And so people think, let's do something with all these coffee grounds. You can walk into Starbucks and get bags of coffee grounds for free. They bag it up for people. And so you hear all sorts of things like coffee grounds will acidify the soil. Nope. Coffee grounds are nearly neutral. They're right around 7. So that's not going to help. Coffee grounds are good fertilizer. Well, not necessarily. Grounds are very high in nitrogen. You don't want to apply them directly to the soil unless they've been composted first. Throw them into your compost bin as green material along with some brown so your ratios don't get out of whack. And then once it's composted, you can add it to your garden. If you put this directly into your garden, it's going to tie up nitrogen. Your plants are going to show nitrogen deficiencies because all the microbes that are going to be needed to decompose those grounds are going to tie up the nitrogen in their little microbial bodies. So just shove it all into your compost pile. There are also people who believe coffee grounds will repel insects, diseases, and fungi. No, science says it doesn't work. But don't put it in the garbage, just throw it in your compost pile. Okay? Peat moss. As horticulturists, we love peat moss. We use a lot of peat moss. Okay? It's in a lot of soilless mixes. And it's been a staple for generations. Unfortunately, peat moss is a bad thing because it's harvested from peat bogs. These are very fragile ecosystems. They don't regenerate very rapidly at all. And those peat bogs are where we sequester a lot of carbon. We sequester that carbon and we keep it out of the atmosphere, and we reduce global warming. Not, well, the Everglades technically would be considered, I think, peat bogs. But Canada, Russia, a lot of peat bogs. Unfortunately, they just don't regenerate very quickly. There are alternatives, though. Some people use peat to cover new grass seed. Like they'll throw out their grass seed and then they'll top dress it with peat. That's not the right thing to use anyway. Peat will strip moisture away from the seed, and you know how imperative it is to keep that seed moist while you're trying to get it to germinate. So don't use peat. Peat's going to just dry it out. Top dress with compost. We use peat in a number of soilless potting mixes. A lot of manufacturers have now gotten away from these peat mixes, and they're offering alternatives. Peat-free mixes, or mixes that have products in it that are substitutes for peat. Things like coconut coir. These are industrial byproducts, so waste products from another industry. That sounds more sustainable, right? Take a waste product and use it instead of something that you have to harvest out of the ground. So you can get those non-peat mixes, or you can get the peat alternatives. The only thing you want to be careful with the coconut coir is that there are sometimes salinity issues. So test the EC of your mix before you use it. Or you can rinse it out. Soak it and drain it very thoroughly before you plant in it. A lot of times the old adage was to mix peat moss with the soil that you dug out of a planting hole and then add that amended soil back into the hole when you planted a tree. We don't do that anymore. It created an interface where the soil in the hole was different than the soil outside the hole. And the roots would have a tendency to just grow in the hole and spiral around and around and around instead of growing out and expanding and becoming established. So now we just backfill with native soil. And you can top dress with compost. And you don't have to use peat at all. Some people, for some reason, and I don't understand this, use peat moss as a mulch. Well, once it gets dry, it can either blow away or it'll compress, and then water won't get through it. Once it's dry, it kind of like packs down and gets yucky. And it's going to pull moisture away from the soil, so your plants are going to be dried out. Water can't get through it, so don't use it as a mulch either. There are lots of better alternatives. So no peat moss. Oh, this one. Oh, this one. This one goes around so often. I think I need a form letter that I can just copy and paste into Facebook like 3 times a day. That might work. I've really stopped trying to answer people on Facebook. I just let the misinformation go because I can't. It's too much. So Epsom salt. This will cure everything from athlete's foot to, I don't know, balding and I don't know. But it'll regrow hair. It's supposed to cure all your garden ailments. But it doesn't. It's supposed to deter slugs, make your roses beautiful, fix blossom end rot, make your tomatoes tastier. I don't know how it's supposed to do that. Get rid of raccoons, only raccoons. I don't know. But obviously that's not the case. Epsom salt is magnesium sulfate. Again, test your soil. Is your soil deficient in anything? Obviously, we don't have soils in Western New York that are deficient in much. If you're going to have a deficiency, it's probably going to be nitrogen. But magnesium and sulfur, not really deficient in our soils. If you do find a weird deficiency, use a fertilizer with micronutrients. People have tested Epsom salts thoroughly because they're so popular. Don't use it as a fertilizer. It does not work as an insecticide or a slug repellent. It just doesn't work. If you're using Epsom salts in the garden, it's going to get into the groundwater. It's going to put things into the water that we don't want into the water. It's irresponsible for anyone to be advising gardeners and plant enthusiasts to apply Epsom salts because it's just not going to work. Use it in your bathtub. Then you can enjoy it. One of the things that we commonly find Epsom salts recommended for is blossom end rot, where the bottom part of tomatoes and peppers gets rotted and looks gross and you don't want to eat them. But blossom end rot is actually a calcium deficiency. And it's a calcium deficiency in young, rapidly expanding fruit tissues that usually happens in the first fruit set of the season. And it's not that calcium is deficient in the soil, calcium is deficient in the fruit tissue. It can't get up the plant, over to the fruit, and throughout the fruit fast enough. Foliar sprays can't penetrate the fruit, so it's not going to work. By the time you realize you have blossom end rot and you think, oh no, what do I do? And you look it up on the internet or you go to the garden center and someone says, buy this or sprinkle down some Epsom salts. The problem is over because the plant is now at full size. It doesn't have that rapid expansion of growth, and the calcium is translocating through the plant body fine, and your next round of tomatoes or peppers will be fine. The trick to keeping blossom end rot from being a big problem is providing even moisture, because that even moisture is going to help that calcium translocate through the plant body. So don't waste your money on any of those sprays, and don't think you have to put Epsom salt in the hole when you plant your tomatoes. It's not going to work. It's really a moisture issue when they're rapidly growing. Everybody in Western New York seems to complain about their soil. Do you love your soil? Do you complain about your soil? Oh, I have hard clay soil. I have terrible soil. It seems like we all bond over how poor our soil is. And we all complain that we have clay, but a lot of us really have silt. If you look at a soil survey map, a lot of us really have heavy silt. But it can still be a problem that we're miserable about our soil. But don't add gypsum or sand to it. Gypsum is calcium sulfate. You hear it promoted a lot. They sell it in the garden centers. We use gypsum in certain agricultural projects, improving certain agricultural soils for crop production. It's not appropriate in the landscape. We also use it if we have saline soils, which is heavily salted soils that we're trying to remediate. But in your home landscape, unless you've got a really odd situation, gypsum is not going to do much for you. It can often cause some nutrient deficiencies. It's not going to improve water holding capacity. It's not going to change texture. It's not going to change aggregation for you. And you're going to wind up with a perched water table because you can only incorporate that gypsum down to a certain level. You can only dig it in a certain level until your back breaks. So it's not going to work well for you. So the effects are very short-lived. You keep having to do it. It's not worth it. What we can do is plant the right plant in the right place, work with what we have, and get over the whole mindset of trying to make our gardens into something that they're not. It is much easier to find the beauty that we can have in an easy, sustainable way rather than trying to make our gardens work differently. If you have a wet spot, if you have a dry spot, if you've got the heavy clay, work with it. Why try to make it something that isn't? You will still be able to achieve your goals. Gypsum may also cause leaching of aluminum, and that's really bad for the Great Lakes. Sand also causes that perched water table because you can only dig it down a certain amount. You're not going to affect the soil texture enough, so don't add sand either. We do add sand on golf courses for certain things, but it's not the same as a landscape situation. One of the best things you can do, though, is organic matter. Compost and arborist wood chips. We all know about compost. We've been hearing about that for years. But arborist wood chips, this is a more recent research. You can use arborist wood chips to suppress weeds and make your clay soil better for very little money and effort. You just pile those arborist wood chips on top of the soil, 12 inches deep. Okay, 12 inches deep. If you're just going for weed suppression, leave them there for about 8 weeks. Pull them back, and then you can build a new bed, and you've killed off all the grass or weeds, whatever's there. If you're going to improve your clay soils, your texture, that type of thing, trying to improve the aggregation for drainage, that type of thing, put those wood chips on there, 12 inches deep, and leave them for about a year. When you come back, you are going to have a great bed to plant in. It's going to add organic matter. It's going to improve the aggregation, so you've got better drainage. It's a really good thing, and you can get arborist wood chips really cheaply. There is a website called Chip Drop. You sign up on Chip Drop, and as the arborists go through the neighborhoods cutting down the trees and chipping them up, instead of hauling all the wood chips back to their facility, they'll dump them at your house for free. Now, they're not the prettiest thing in the world, but they're effective. Compost, we all know about compost. Mix your green and brown refuse in the appropriate ratios, and you wind up with this black gold that's fantastic for your soil. Just top dress it on. You don't need to mix it in. We actually want to avoid digging this stuff into our soil. When you dig or when you till, you're breaking up the soil aggregates. You're destroying all the homes that the microbes have created. You're breaking the soil fungi hyphae, the little arms and legs of the fungi. So you need to leave the soil alone. Just top dress with the compost and let the compost do its work. Compost tea. A number of years ago, all of a sudden, we started seeing lots of compost tea products available in the stores. Now we don't see compost tea products, we see compost tea kits. Because all the people who tried the compost tea products realized it really didn't work. But now they're trying to sucker people into buying the compost tea kits. And they're trying to say it's going to add nutrition to your soil, improve the flavor of your vegetables. Really? Unless you, I don't know. That doesn't work. So avoid this. It's a lot of work. Just use compost. Why are you going to make soup out of your compost, and then you have to add things like molasses and other ingredients? Make me some cookies instead. Compost tea is so diluted, the nutrient content's not there. Just top dress with some compost and let Mother Nature do the work. It's rain and compost. So science has disproven the claims for compost tea. Cinnamon. This goes around. See, unbelievable things are possible. That's disproven. There are claims that cinnamon will stop damping off diseases for your seedlings. It'll repel mosquitoes. No. The cinnamon you buy at the store is not really cinnamon. It's cassia, unless you buy really expensive cinnamon. There is limited evidence that cinnamon oil extracted from real cinnamon has some very basic insecticidal properties. We don't have access to those oils, and they're very expensive, and so why not just use something that actually does work? Other household items. Eggshells, put them in your compost pile, but they take forever to decompose. They're not going to do anything for you. They're not even a good source of nutrients because they take so long. Milk, no. Dish soap. I used to hear that put some Dawn dish soap in a spray bottle with water and use it to kill the bugs, the aphids. Dish soap is the wrong thing. Dish soap has surfactant in it to break down grease, and that's bad for plants. That's going to hurt the waxy coating on plant leaves. There are horticultural soaps and oils that we use as insecticides that are fine, but they're meant for plants. Dish soap will hurt the plants. Mothballs, they don't work either, not even for critter control. But there are sustainable options. Practice integrated pest management, rotating the crops that you grow, preparing your site, and using good sanitation, getting rid of the weeds and any type of host plants. Encourage beneficial insects. So plant the plants that the good guys like, and let the good guys eat the bad guys. When you take home these spider plants today, you may be taking home some good guys. We just released 12,000 ladybugs in the greenhouse, so we might have some good guys in here for you. We'll have to see. And yes, if you need to, judicious pesticide use. You don't know. Slug and snail control. Look at them drink that beer. I hope it wasn't expensive beer. Will they fall in and drown? Some will. They'll get a little tipsy. But it doesn't work. Copper only works until it gets oxidized, and I'm not going to go out and shine the copper around my plants, so don't do that. Diatomaceous earth will work until it rains. Eggshells, they'll crawl right over. Salt, don't be putting salt in your garden because now you just added salt to the soil and it's going to harm your plants. Although they are kind of fun to watch while the slugs fizzle. Makes you feel better. So what do you want to do for snails? Well, integrated pest management again. Proper sanitation, get rid of all the debris. Drip irrigation if you can. Soaker hoses are nice, so you don't have moist situations. Choose plants that they don't particularly care for. And if you have to, you can use pesticides or baits. However, there are problems. Iron phosphate, there are some issues. EDTA is the carrier. It can be very dangerous to pets. Metaldehyde, again, dangerous to pets. Although some of the formulations contain a compound called bitrix, which they will avoid. So just be careful if you're going to use those baits. The EDTA is also extremely harmful to earthworms. So you have to kind of balance what you're doing. If it's your prized hosta collection, you may want to use it. If you don't have a prized hosta collection, you may want to let the slugs have a little bit of a dinner. So other items that people use for pesticides and herbicides, like vinegar. The vinegar you buy at the grocery store doesn't work. Acetic acid will, but it's very dangerous, and it has some environmental issues. But regular vinegar doesn't work. Salt, again, don't be putting salt on the soil because that's going to harm your plants. Dish soap, we talked about. Essential oils, they smell really nice, and they can make you feel good, but they're not going to do anything as a pesticide or an herbicide. So we see these things going around social media all the time. All of these homemade recipes for herbicides or pesticides, weed spray, pesticides with essential oils, they're not going to work. Don't do it. So the best pesticide recipe is not to make your own pesticide. There are organic options that are formulated to be safe and effective. Follow all the rules on the label. If you are going to try to fight the weeds in your lawn, practice IPM. Crowd out those weeds by overseeding. Water and fertilize properly. You can use compost. Aerate like we talked about and dethatch. Mow high. Higher turf crowds out the weeds. Or think about a lawn alternative. Do you need grass? The pollinators would really like it if you grew things that weren't turf. Still beautiful. You can still walk on them. But creeping thyme, chamomile, clover, blue star creeper, Scotch moss, ajuga, all sorts of things out there that would look great in your front yard, and you don't have to mow it. Think about saving that kind of time. Double digging. When I was in college, this is what they told us we had to do. We don't do this anymore. It's backbreaking. It destroys soil structure, and it creates this interface where you can't, at that level where you stopped digging, where the soil will not infiltrate as well. So don't double dig. If you read a lot of the old-time gardening books, it tells you to prepare a bed in this manner. It's not appropriate anymore. Lasagna gardening or sheet mulching. This one's really popular, and unfortunately, it doesn't break down fast enough. When you dig through this, you're going to wind up hitting cardboard, hitting newspaper. It just doesn't break down. Do the arborist wood chips. Add your compost. Don't try to do the layering. Don't do the sheet mulching. You get a lot more slugs this way. You create this slimy mess. It's not going to work. Use those arborist wood chips. It's going to do everything you need. You don't have to till it in, you just pile it up. Mosquito repellent plants. We know that there is a big problem with the diseases mosquitoes carry. And so we don't want to screw this one up. So we think, if we plant different kinds of plants, we're going to have fewer mosquitoes in our yard. Well, it doesn't work that way. No plant in a pot is going to keep you from getting bitten by mosquitoes. Okay? So we hear about all different kinds of plants that will keep the mosquitoes away. These won't work. And you're like, well, what about Citronella? I know that works. No. Citronella, the plant they sell at the store called Citronella, is not Citronella. It's a geranium, pelargonium. It doesn't produce citronella oil. Citronella oil is actually a compound produced by lemongrass. And you're like, okay, I've seen that on Facebook. I can grow lots of lemongrass in big pots on my patio. Guess what? It's not going to work. In a pot on the patio, it's going to look nice, but it's not going to do anything about the mosquitoes. So what do you do for mosquitoes? Well, because of the risk of disease, you need to stick with what works. Proven repellents, clothing. You can get clothing that is infused with repellents. This PMD, this is an oil extracted from eucalyptus. So that's plant-based. We just have too much risk of all the West Nile and other insect, mosquito, and tick-borne diseases this year. Container planting. Some people like to add gravel or broken pottery pieces to the bottoms of their containers before they plant. That's not what you want to do. They think it's going to improve drainage, but what it actually does is it moves the wet spot up higher towards the root of the plant. Now, if you're just trying to make your pots lighter weight, If you've got really big pots and you want to be able to move them from your garage to your front porch, put some empty pot bottles in the bottom. That's okay, but you don't need rocks. You don't need gravel. Male and female bell peppers. Nope. Nope. This one's male, that one's female. This one's sweeter, that one's better for cooking. No. No. Basic elementary school science. Peppers are fruit. They come from the flowers. They don't have a gender. Okay? It's out there and it gets spread around. I'm not kidding. Critter control. Irish Spring has a lock on the market for deer control. I don't know why. I don't know. I guess Dove and Ivory won't work, but Irish Spring, I don't know. So if you drive around and you see dangly half bars of soap, they're trying to get rid of deer. It doesn't work. Don't put hair in bags. It just doesn't work, okay? And it makes your yard look really funny. So if you do have critters, you're really going to wind up with physical barriers. You can rotate some repellents. If you have moles or voles, they eat worms. Grub treatments are not effective in repelling moles and voles. You can try castor oil every other week, but they're kind of yucky. You can use these lethal traps, The castor oil repellents will typically send them over to your neighbor's yard, so try that. There are some baits, but those baits are toxic, so you may just have to live with it. They typically don't stay around very long if you can handle it for a while. Unusual colors of plants. Well, we've seen these: rainbow roses, blue orchids, black bleeding hearts, pink pampas grass, rainbow tomatoes. This is the time of year for the rainbow tomatoes. Painted succulents, and cacti with flowers. These are all fake, but they get spread around social media. I just bought seeds on eBay for my rainbow tomatoes. These are all fake. You need to be a smart consumer. Know what cultivars actually exist. How is that plant actually propagated, and is that even a possibility? Those rainbow roses are dyed. Those blue orchids are dyed. If you take home a blue orchid plant and it reblooms, it's going to be white. Watch out if you buy seeds from places like eBay or Amazon. Look at the reviews for different companies. There are some companies that promote things on Facebook that are just absolutely horrific. If it says it's rare, it's probably not even real. And if you're getting something from overseas, it may violate import law, because there are very strict plant importation laws. Bulb leaves. Once your daffodils and your tulips are done blooming, don't bend the leaves over thinking that you're going to keep your garden more tidy. Those leaves need to photosynthesize and store some energy down in those bulbs for next year. Okay? So you can get bigger bulbs and they can spread and you can get more flowers next year. If you bend them over and braid them or rubber band them up, they can't do their job. But that's one of those things that goes around. Oh, and this one. Have you seen this? Put the onions in your socks or the banana peel on your head, you'll feel better. Really? My grandma used to tell me the banana peel thing. I never did it though, even though she told me. So we've covered a lot of information, and I know you still want to learn more. So come take a class. You can come take our classes towards a degree or a certificate. If you happen to be age 60 or older, you can audit our classes for free. Shh, don't tell anybody I told you it's free. And then you could also, if you're not quite 60, come and take our classes via community education. That's lower cost. It's our exact same horticulture classes. We teach you all the same stuff. And if you love us, if you like it, and you want to keep going, you can convert those classes to credit. We've got 100% employment for our graduates. We have scholarships available. I have some alumni here if you wanted to talk to them and they could tell you I'm not lying. We do a lot of fun stuff, a lot of networking. And we are looking at building a new greenhouse facility on campus. Okay, so I won't bore you with this. I will take your questions. Who has questions? In fact, questions. Yes.
I'm trying to plant something next to my home, next to a black walnut tree.
Okay.
Nothing lives. My roses look horrible. Everything I've attempted to plant there died.
There are lists of plants that will grow near black walnut.
I mean, really close, like from you to me.
Yeah.
That's so close.
Yeah. So you may also be dealing with shade issues,
Yes.
root competition issues, not just black walnut issues.
And because there's another house at black walnut than our home. And that house shades all the setting.
So it may be a number of issues, not just the juglone in the soil, but also shade and root competition.
So there is a list somewhere? I mean, are they like, that I can just use as a fill? I don't even care if it's not a flower, but I need something.
Yeah.
Then
Look
water
up.
drips from the roof, it just splatters all over the place.
Yep, you can Google the list of plants that'll grow under black walnut trees and then figure out which ones are for lower light.
Okay.
And make sure you're providing it enough water. What else? Anybody else? Yeah.
Yeah, I have a beautiful perennial garden, and now they're coming up. What I'd got, and I can't weed, I just can't, my neck is really bad. And I'd got preen, I thought, but now I said if I put that around and it keeps out the weeds, is it going to kill the plants? Well, the best thing probably would be to use those chips instead for
You
the perennial
could.
garden for weeds.
You could. There is a preen for perennial gardens that will work. And you could just mulch heavy if you wanted and then put the preen down. Because the wood chips, you kind of need a thicker base.
The preen won't kill the
Get the preen for perennials.
Okay.
And there will be a list on the back that says perennials to avoid. There's a list on that container. You want to double check you don't have anything that's sensitive.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good.
I know when you were talking about peat moss and not using that in the backfill, when you plant trees. I'm planting some trees at home right now, and we had actually gotten some of like lakeside sod that was higher quality to mix in with the native soil that was there.
I wouldn't mix it in. I just top dress it. Is that the black yellow
Oh,
bag
is that
stuff?
ever good?
Yeah,
It's
just
good,
top dress
but-
it. Backfill with native soil and top dress with the big yellow bag stuff. That's good stuff.
Oh, it's real good, except try to get it out of the bag.
Yep.
And it compacts.
Us
You've
shorter
gotta
people,
shovel, and
us
you're
shorter
trying to
people.
shovel it
Yeah.
out. It's only good as it doesn't get wet.
Yes.
Close it up.
I know the British are looking for plastic alternatives. Is your program going to be looking toward that in the future? So you have pots that are not.
We would, yes, if a company starts producing something more sustainable, we would love to take advantage of that. Absolutely. Yes, Linda?
Carolyn, I have a question about the arborist wood chips. A lot of what the arborists are cutting down right now in this immediate
The ash?
environment is it safe to use?
We've got it already. It's not going to change anything. I wouldn't.
It's safe to use in the garden, it's not
Yeah.
going to hurt anything else besides the ash trees?
Right.
Okay.
It's already here. It's not going to change anything.
Ashes away when they do that
Yeah.
root.
Hi.
I have a two question. How to get rid of Japanese beetles?
Okay, Japanese beetles. Don't get those pheromone traps, or if you do, put them in your neighbor's yard. Because they will bring so many more beetles to your yard than what you would have had before. There's not a lot we can do about them. You can use a contact spray. You can get safer soap, but unless there's really not a lot. Yeah, you can walk around, pick them off.
What is IMD?
IPM?
IMD or IPM?
IPM is Integrated Pest Management. Yep,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Oh, sorry.
Excuse me, how do I cure my never-blooming wisterias?
Oh, wisteria are finicky. If they're not blooming, and they've not been blooming for a long time?
40 years. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, wisteria are finicky. You may need to take a shovel and root prune it.
Did it.
You root prune it?
Didn't work It was years ago, but I.
Have you talked very sternly to it?
I'll try anything.
Oh, you know, some of them just won't.
How could there be?
Some of them just won't. I know.
bought the plant that already had one bloom on it.
Yeah,
and
some
it's
of them
bloomed
just
ever
absolutely
since,
won't.
Because I know it's gonna bloom.
We're gonna take one more because I know people have individual personal questions about the garden that Carolyn is gonna be happy to answer. So we'll take one more group question and then I wanna do a wrap up for this.
I think this is, I wanted to know, what is the best way, because we have all these plastic things, and, you know, it's good to what is the best way to sanitize pots to reuse them?
Well, there's a couple options depending upon how big of a task you want to make it. You can wash them with a diluted bleach solution if you're just doing a few. If this is something you're going to do on a regular basis, building kind of a contraption that will steam them and pasteurize them is a kind of an option as well. But that's if you're going to be doing a lot. Mm-hmm.